Hi folks, I am Florida Man, and we've finally reached that moment, that inevitable moment in the Basics of Austria series when we put together everything we've learned and try to come to some conclusions about the Endgame. We've gone through over 14 million possibilities and come up with the best ways to reach the solo. Actually, I do not have superpowers or access to alternate dimensions, so I just went through 100 games that Austria won, and I used those end results to reverse engineer how Austrian players should best approach the end goal of getting the solo. Please enjoy. My analysis will be focused on which regions of the map you, as Austria, are most likely to achieve control over, and where you should focus your energies in order to reach the goal. Austria will almost always have control over the following regions when it achieves the solo victory, so you should make sure you have the ability to secure them before you spend time thinking about how to get further away. Romania, Bulgaria, Warsaw, and of course the Austrian home centers themselves. In virtually all Austrian solos, Austria has control over these spaces. The main takeaway I have from this is that in the late game, if you worked with Russia and kept him as an ally into the middle or late game, you have to make sure you have more armies in the center of the map than Russia does, because Warsaw is virtually always a component in the Austrian solo, and Russia isn't going to give that critical center up willingly. If you don't outnumber Russia with armies, you'll never get it. To me, this also suggests that if you worked with Russia early on, you should consider an alliance in the middle game with Germany against Russia. Going to centers you are slightly less certain to have, there's roughly a 95% chance that a victorious Austrian will have Greece, and some of Italy. It's very interesting that Austria is more likely to have an Italian center or two in the event of an Austrian solo than it is to have Turkish centers. To me, this goes to show that regardless of how tightly we want to work with Italy, our earliest ally is eventually going to be a target. When you play as Austria, it doesn't matter who you start out working with. You have to look for opportunities to stab. The same holds true for Turkey, since there's roughly a 90% chance of a soloing Austria possessing a Turkish center or two when the game concludes, and the same applies to Germany. Basically, Austria has no permanent friends, at least if Austria wants to win. A successful soloing Austria has about a 90% chance of having Sevastopol, an 87% chance of having Moscow, and roughly a 75% chance of possessing all of the Turkish or all of the Italian centers. So you need to take not just one or two, but pretty much all your neighbors for all they're worth. You even have an almost 50% chance of having St. Pete as a successfully soloing Austria, which goes to show that it's a pretty important consideration for your endgame to keep the West divided until you're ready to swoop in for the solo push, because it's generally impossible to hold St. Pete if the West is determined to take it or keep you out of it from the East. You have an even higher chance of capturing Tunis, at around 55%, which suggests to me that you need to make sure that you don't neglect your navy. That's really the only center you're likely to take that you can't hold with only armies, though. You have only a 33% chance of having Marseille in the endgame, which is really minuscule when you consider that Italy has over an 80% chance of holding that center when Italy solos. So although Marseille looks close on the map, it's very unlikely that you're going to end up finding it convenient to take that. That might indicate either that Austria is very rarely naval, which is true, but in addition it might indicate that you are likely to betray and conquer Italy and the Italian centers near the very end rather than earlier on, which would explain why you don't have much chance of having French centers. It's not a tiny chance. You have a 15% chance of having Paris, a 22% chance of having territory in Iberia. On the other hand, the fact that you have almost as much chance of having Paris as of having Iberia strongly suggests to me that most of the successful Austrian players aren't so much developing a big navy as simply doing really well at projecting power over land, since Paris is landlocked. If you're really developing a navy, you should have a much higher chance of getting an Iberian center than you do, because it's almost exactly as accessible by fleet as Marseille is. However, the overwhelming statistical conclusion about where your 18th center is coming from is that it's likely to be Germany. In most games, a winning Austria will get Tunis, but that's only about a 55% chance. But in over 90% of games, a winning Austria has a piece of Germany, and any part of Germany is over the stalemate line. So whether you get Tunisia or not, there is an extremely high likelihood of you acquiring Munich or Berlin. Once you have one German center, there's a decent chance of you acquiring another, although I should note that there's only a 29% chance of you conquering all of Germany if you solo. That's higher than the 22% chance of you getting some of Scandinavia, though, so both arenas are certainly worth investing resources in going toward the endgame. I hadn't mentioned this yet, but I also looked at the chance of you acquiring a centre in England. It was unsurprisingly low, at roughly 7%. Similarly, your odds of getting Holland or Belgium is only around 14%. You definitely still need to try to have at least a small navy, because winning Austria has a 76% chance of having all of Turkey, and a 73% chance of having all of Italy, in addition to the 56% chance of holding Tunis, and the smaller but still relevant 33% chance of holding Marseille, and the 22% chance of holding an Iberian centre. Aside from the perhaps obvious idea that you shouldn't completely neglect to build a navy, my major takeaways are that you should eliminate Russia or Turkey first, because their centres will almost certainly be a part of an Austrian solo victory, and then you should probably eliminate the other of the two if you have the option. Once Russia is gone, you should do your best to secure St. Petersburg and break into Scandinavia if it's possible. This is an endeavour you won't have to, or really even be able to, devote an insane amount of resources to, so there's not really any harm in investing a little effort into securing the northernmost centres possible. Austria really shouldn't be able to get and hold St. Pete, and yet almost half of the time, a soloing Austria has that centre, which tells you a lot. If Turkey and Russia are both gone, I recommend that you fortify their centres under your control, and you try to absorb all of Germany. A soloing Austria will only have all of Germany about 29% of the time, but those aren't really bad odds, and your chances of having part of Germany if you solo is over 90%, so you almost have to take the chance. Munich and Berlin are your best shot at getting over that stalemate line. Once you have established a defensible position in Germany and are hopefully slowly advancing, you will want to get Italy to lower his guard and then pull a dramatic and powerful stab into Italy, who I'm assuming here remained your ally for most of the game. And you want to descend onto the Italian homeland, build a new fleet immediately, go after whatever centres Italy has besides its home centres, build another fleet, and take Tunis if that's at all possible. Taking Tunis or not can be the difference between victory and defeat. Ideally, you'll have allowed Italy to capture Marseille or Iberia beforehand, so that you have a good shot at taking one or all of those centres yourself. A key to the success of this general strategy is that you want to keep the West divided, as you can imagine, because if the West is strong and or united, you will never get into Scandinavia. You will not hold on to St. Petersburg. You will probably not even get Germany. And Italy probably won't get any French centres that can then become Austrian property. Austria has something of a narrower path to tread in order to get to the solo, I think. The ideal for Austria is that the Western world be full of betrayal and infighting with little or no resolution. Failing that, you want the English and Germans to be relatively fragmented at least, so it's preferable for France to be the stronger one there, especially if he can be kept occupied with his two neighbours until the middle and late game, when Italy can bring the fight to France directly. That's a good jumping off point for you to have a better shot at dominating what's left of the map. I hope you've enjoyed this wandering game plan for how you get to your Austrian solo, and the Basics of Austria series in general. If you did, you should consider subscribing, so you'll get notice of future projects, which will include the Basics of Turkey and Basics of England series. As I'm sure you can tell since I'm more than halfway through, I'm going to finish this, and then I expect we'll explore some exciting new possibilities. We also appreciate it when you like and comment. We are very excited to be nearing 1,000 subscribers to Florida Man Diplomacy, and you'll want to see whatever video we end up making as the 1,000 subscriber celebration video, which will probably be some sort of massive diplomacy commentary or something. Our thanks go out to the special individuals whose names or usernames now appear on screen, who support the channel either through Patreon or through subtitle translations. You too can be one of them and join the Alligator Army. Until then, Florida Man, out.